It's now.
Okay, we're recording.
All right, let's kick this one into gear. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And two of the greatest hockey teams on the planet. All right. Get started with consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve? So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Anything anyone wants either removed or discussed? Jen, you okay? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any against? All right.
Who was my second on that motion? I'm sorry. Oh, thank you for having.
The Dutchess County BOCES spotlight is there for February. Next we go to President, Vice President's report. One of the things I'm going to ask Cheryl to take a look at is our next possibility for a retreat or to continue our discussion about reviews and goals and all that. So not here, but I'll have her give you each a call and see if we can't narrow down the next timing of retreat. Couple of things. So Dutchess County School Board Association, or Dutchess County BOCES, I should say, the board has 2 open seats. Although did I read something where one of those person decided to run? Yeah.
I have not seen any info for that.
Me again.
All right, so if you're interested in it, have at it. If not, or if you'd like more information on it, just let us know. But there are 2 seats available. And then every year Dutchess County School Board Association runs a kind of a information session on perspective, or for prospective board members, like what is it all about? How, it tries to emphasize things that you really can affect and things that you can't, give people a better idea of what being on a school board is like. And it's not, you don't necessarily have to be have to be a brand new board member. If you're interested in attending one of those sessions, just let myself or Cheryl know. Do we know if the students can attend that?
I don't think so. No,
All right.
because it's for members who are going to be voting members and they had their own
Orientation.
orientation.
Okay,
Yeah, and then I would imagine that they'll do that again for them,
okay.
for new incoming students, because it's very different.
Okay. All right, never mind. Yeah, Mike and Bryce are the 2 members of the Beacon that are not running or seeking reelection. Nomination election letter, I think I said nominees cannot reside in Hyde Park.
No,
Right, so
Oh,
if
'cause
you
they already-
have, if they have a member on the BOCES board from one of those school districts, you can't have more than one. So it would have to be one of the school districts that's not currently represented on the board.
I mean, if you know anybody that's interested in it, feel free to, let me know and we can get information for both. But with that, that's all I think I have. Yeah. Chris, did you have anything?
No, I'm good.
You want to touch base on that? Yeah.
Yeah, we prior to this, we met with MEF and just discussed just the grant history and different things we'd like to start bringing in. Those who support us as far as PTO, MEF, and the booster clubs. give them the recognition they deserve. But yeah, we just had a quick meeting, as far as just, dating back probably 10, 15 years as far as how the grants worked and the changes that are being made and try and just reconnect. So meeting went well.
All right, student members.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Limerick High School has continued to move forward with a great school year. The winter student athletes have put in a lot of work throughout the seasons, both academically and athletically. Winter sports are going to be wrapped up soon, and spring sports will begin shortly after. The coming weeks, Mr. Syke and the teachers will be holding an annual elective fair for all the students. This will provide all of our students with an opportunity to possibly explore new and exciting elective options, meet the teachers who will be teaching specific courses, and learn about college offerings, and discover programs that will align with their interests and future goals. Our NHS ceremony will be held on the next Wednesday, March 4th, for our new inductees. Our Molly Glen trip takes place Friday, March 13th through March 16th, and these are some of the few exciting events that will be taking place soon. Anything else, Dana? That was pretty much it.
Is there a lot of prep for the UN trip?
Yes, so we start from, I would say, from the second week of school. And then there's multiple things that go into it. We meet once a week, but we're having a preparation, possibly, it's not set in stone yet, about a possible, mock conference with John Jay, which is going to be condensed into 3 hours, which is on itself a lot, but you have to keep in mind that the typical conference is like 2 days. And there's like 3-hour sessions 3 times a day. And then the last session is 2 hours, like, per day. So it is very exhausting. But it's very rewarding once you effort and, you and your partner do it, which I can speak to from past experience. So it's really nice and it's really rewarding, especially, since I am a senior this year and I will be leaving to go on to my next adventure at my new college. But it's really nice seeing, the quote unquote next generation come up, because I've been doing this since 8th grade. So it's really heartwarming to see how much work they've been putting in. So
Very good, very good. Questions? No? Very good, thank you, guys. All right, let's see. Superintendent?
So Cheryl's gonna load on the screen a copy of the current budget development update for this meeting. As you know, we are in February. We will have a proposed budget in April. And so we are a ways away from a finalized proposed budget that will be presented to the board and the community. But at each meeting, we like to sort of just review the timeline. This is where we are right now. What we know is that we've seen the legislative run of the budget. We will be waiting for the second run. And then I'm hearing that that should be coming in the week of March 9th. They are hoping to have the second run finalized by March 16th. And so we are anticipating a late budget again this year, which is not really helpful for schools. So we could potentially, as in recent years past, have to adopt the budget without actually knowing what state aid we can even plan on getting, which is extremely problematic. One of the things that we've been facing in recent years is cuts to our budget, both at the federal and state level. And as you know, there's been no relief on the tax cap calculation or any of the exclusions to the tax cap. And so year over year, schools are asked to be doing more with less. And so we've taken a really hard hit in the last couple of years, and it looks as though we'll be taking another hard hit this year as well in terms of aid funding. So I'll go through a little bit of what we have here, reminding you that this is where we are present day. Everything is subject to change, but this is the best information we have right now as of Friday afternoon. So when we look at this, we're always looking at this from the lens of our sustainability objective, which is that we ensure that our annual budget and spending programs include a focus on maximizing efficiency, supporting and maintaining programs, and leveraging our resources, and also to minimize waste. So we're always looking at that from a sustainability perspective, not just in our resources, but also in the financial decisions that we make as well. And so our planning thus far, this is a very similar process that you'll see every single year. We meet with our department leaders. We go through all of the things that were spent for this year. We look at trends over the last couple of years, and we try to come up with reasonable projections as to where we hope to be or where we think we will be in the subsequent school year, so that we can maintain budget growth, because that is where we are. We are in a world where everything costs more expensive, is more expensive in terms of buying, right, experiencing anything. And so we are trying to do it in the most fiscally responsible manner, which recognizing that we also have programs to fund, and we don't want our students to lose out on any of the programs or funding if not necessary. And so we also look at transfers and reallocations within the budget, because we want to be able to be as transparent as possible with the board and the community about where the money is going. So we've been really good over the past couple of years at making sure that we are organizing budget lines in a way that truly reflects where that money is being spent. And so you may remember some of the things that we did was we made specific graduation codes. We've made specific codes for like E&L programming, so that we can be very clear on where the money is going. Should anybody in the community or anybody on the board want an easier drill down within the budget book, they're able to do that. And so our budget priorities are always going to be maintaining and expanding academic supports and opportunities. We look every single year, we look at our students who are being educated outside of the district, and we look to see if there's any common program needs and or management needs within a 36-month age band. And that is typically how special education programs are developed. So if we have students who are being educated outside of the district within that 36-month age range with similar needs and similar levels of functioning, you've seen us bring some of those programs back into district quite successfully. And so every year we review that. We also take the time to review that. Anna's been great in reaching out to what we refer to loosely as the Eastern Five, which is the 5 little small districts on this side of the county, and talk about what programs do you need for your students with disabilities, what programs do we need with our students with disabilities, and is there any way that we can combine that programming and work more efficiently together, right? Through intermunicipal agreements, we do not accept tuition, but we would be able to accomplish this by setting up intermunicipal agreements with any of the school districts that could potentially benefit from a partnership. And so we continue to, again, update and align all the budget codes, and also allocate funding for maintenance and repair costs due to aging equipment. So that's one of the things that we are very conscious of, is setting up like 5-year replacement cycles, making sure that if there's anything that we do purchase, that we also have a plan for maintaining those things going forward. Many people will have heard that common theme during our capital project, right? It's not just about building these systems or renovating things, but it's also about how are we going to maintain them over time. And so what you're going to see here are some major budgetary considerations. For the 26-27 school year, we have the inflation growth factor of 2.63%. And so that is the inflation rate according to the state of New York. It doesn't necessarily reflect the true increased costs of anything, but that is the assigned inflation growth factor that we are allowed to use in that 7-step calculation that we refer to as the tax cap. People call it 2% tax cap, which is really sort of a misnomer, because it may not actually flesh out to be 2% exactly, but it's a multi-step, 7-step calculation that gives us this growth factor that we are allowed to increase tax levy by. In addition to that, the tax levy growth factor that is also applied to that formula, again dictated by the state, is 2%. And so you put it all together, and that is where we get our tax cap percentage from. That is the maximum amount that we can increase levy to levy from year to year. And so this year we are looking at foundation aid. So far with the first run, we're looking at a 1% increase in foundation aid. And so foundation aid 1% is basically $29,000. So we're glad we're getting it, but it's not a whole lot of money. And the total aid package that is being reflected is up 5%. when we look at that, I think we will be able to see that that's not a real true 5%. Some of it is per pupil allocation, which we are not necessarily able to benefit from at the maximum rate or potential allocations because we don't have that many students, right? And so we have to be very clear that these numbers may look better on paper than they are in actuality because there's a maximum ceiling that we could potentially reach if we had students coming out of the woodworks for things like pre-K. When we get to it, I'll explain what that would look like. And so some of our expenses that are hitting really, really hard is our NYSER insurance rate is projected to increase between 10 and 12%. Our health insurance rate through the consortium. Now, mind you, we purchased through a consortium, and the point of doing that is to be able to, when you buy in with more people, generally you get better rates. And so what we're seeing is an anticipated increase of approximately 16.5%. And so we are hearing that there might be some relief in that percentage, but we have nothing definite at this point. And so we are going with the best actuals that we have at this moment, which is 16.5%. So if you look at that, it's $889,291, or approximately 2.49% of the total current budget. Reminding you, when we look at that tax cap calculation, 2.49 could potentially be all we are able to increase, right? And so the cost of doing just these two things could potentially soak up any opportunity to increase our levy from this year to next year. So we'll look a little bit at we'll look a little bit at our revenues, and then we'll look at some of our expenses as well. So our primary revenue continues to come from our real property taxes. When you look at the amount that comes from taxes, you're looking at roughly 78% of our budget. And the balance is going to come from various forms of state aid. So when you look at the estimated, you can go forward. When you look at the estimates that have been projected from the governor's proposed budget, you'll see that overall the tax cap calculation, which will inform the real property taxes, is that going to be supplemented with the aid projections, and that is going to be the budget that we're going to have to balance for the 26-27 fiscal year. And so as of January 20th, the numbers will appear on the next slide. And they're kind of small. So our foundation aid, as I mentioned, is up 1%, but we've taken a significant hit in transportation aids. Both our summer transportation and our school year transportation are down 27% and 35% respectively. We are not unique in this. You will remember we took a huge hit in transportation aid last year, and we're taking another huge hit in transportation aid this coming year as well. Mind you, we are also like staring down this runway of the electric bus conversations, supposedly happening, coming soon to a theater near you. But also, we will be looking to renew our contract in that same fiscal year. And so I can only imagine what the aid deficit plus the increase in that contract is going to do in the next couple of school years. Our building aid is down, projected to be down. We are, however, seeing that our BOCES aid is projected to be up, and that is in large part due to the early college access program, the dual enrollment programs that we've done. So we'll be looking at getting some BOCES aid back. We also have an increase in some high cost aids, which is some of the high cost programming, and then the high cost aids for private programming as well. If you look down, one of the biggest places that we're seeing growth within the state aid package is going to be the universal pre-K aid. So it says that it's up 36%, which of course, why wouldn't we love that, right? But that's really only if we have a number of students to benefit. So what happened is that there was a per pupil allocation of $5,400. That's been a fairly consistent number since we started the expansion program of UPK. Ironically, it was in the same year that the district decided to bring the pre-K program in. There was also monies that were put out to school districts for UPK that same fiscal year. And so it was $5,400 per pupil. At this time, the governor's run of the budget, which is the first run of the budget, is proposing $10,000 per pupil. But again, we are only able to benefit from that maximum number if we have enough students to be able to use all of that money. And so we don't just get that flat dollar amount. So even though it's part of our total aid package, it's not really necessarily realistic. So if you go to the next slide, just some additional information about what will happen if the Save Harmless provision is through, which Save Harmless essentially means that everybody will get a minimum 1%, which is what I just explained before. It's $29,000. And it talks about here, as you can see on the right-hand side, the 25-26 aid per pupil for 4-year-old pre-K was $5,400, and we're now at $10,000 in the 26-27 school year. But again, it all goes down to how many students that we have that actually were able to use that $10,000 multiplier. When you look below, you can look at key foundation aid factors. One of the things, and I think I've mentioned this in previous meetings, one of the things that the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents is advocating for is continued studies of the foundation aid formula. And so these are some of the factors that go into it. And I'm not sure if these are familiar terms for the board. So I did put down below what those things mean. So like the selected TAPU is the total aided foundation per pupil unit. And so that's based on the average daily membership with additional weighted factors for students who are in special programming groups, like students with disabilities are represented as a 1.4 multiplier rather than just 1. So a combined wealth ratio and also pupil needs index. So all of these things factor into how foundation aid is created. And so one of the things that's interesting about Millbrook is we have our combined wealth ratio, the wealth of this geographic area is one story, and then the story of the number of students who are living with a certain level of socioeconomic status, which factors in different ways. And so one of the things we also know about that is because we have the universal lunch program, breakfast and lunch. Currently, we're also not getting accurate reporting of students whose families are living in need, right? And so these things we keep saying, you can't just do this one thing and not expect it to have negative impact in this other area, right? So because we have the community eligibility program and all of our students get free breakfast and lunch, which I think is fabulous, less and less families are applying for the food lunch program that we used to previously have, right? Because they don't have to anymore. And so it's also about educating the community. And we did send a letter and we'll continue to send more letters explaining like, that's not the only reason we need this information. We also need this information to help with like AP fee waivers, right? If a student is taking AP classes, the fee waivers do help them significantly reduce the cost of those AP exams. If students are taking classes through, say, Dutchess Community College, the financial is significantly less if they put in their forms for free and reduced price lunches. And so all of those things matter. They matter in multiple ways. They matter when it comes down to understanding the picture of the district from a budgeting standpoint, not just locally, but obviously on the state level as well, because that's where our foundation aid formula is developed, is based on need and multiple factors. So we're hoping that the Rockefeller Institute, who did the original foundation aid study, will continue to dig in and really look at what model, because they gave multiple different models that the state could use, what model really benefits the most districts and hurts the fewest kind of thing. And so we're hoping for that, but minimally that's, 2 years away, right? And so we're looking at relief for what happens next year. And these are the numbers that we have to go from right now. And so the year-to-year runs, when we look, we're showing growth, but the reality is that, again, some of this growth may really not be real when we talk about things like that pre-K money and some other of these, we're looking at a huge hit in that transportation aid. We're looking at a big hit in terms of building aid. And so some of that will be recouped in future years because we will go back to building projects and that kind of thing, paying that off. But the reality is where we are right now. You will see more information on the next page. So at this time, the inflation growth factor for the year is 2.63% versus the tax levy growth factor of 2%. The initial foundation aid estimates is essentially we are getting $29,000. The total state aid estimate is 5.1%, but as I just said, it actually may not even happen that way because if we don't have the students to claim that UPK funding, we will not get it. That's number one. Number two, the age-old story that we tell you every single year is this is what they say we're getting. However, we just get notification that our aid has been cut mid-year for what, with no explanation of why, right? Like, we know we said you were getting this, but that's not actually happening. And then add in the fact that in addition to all of that, we won't even really know what real numbers we're planning with until after our budget has been set. That's what we're being projected at this point. Do I have any, firm knowledge of that? No, but it doesn't seem unlikely given where we've been in the last couple of years. So 25-26 total estimated versus actual aid received was about a 2% decrease. So over $100,000 that just didn't come in. And so that's representing about 0.3% of our budget. And so reminding you that we're only legally permitted to keep 4% of our total operating budget in an unassigned fund balance. We don't have a lot of money just laying around because we're not allowed to do that, right? So, and also don't forget things like reserves, which is our assigned fund balance essentially, right? We are only able to keep reserves in certain areas. So one of the things, again, through advocacy through the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, I sit on their steering committee. One of the things that we are advocating for is to start considering things like a health insurance reserve, right? Currently not permissible, but makes a lot of sense, especially given what we're looking at right now, right? With the crazy 16.5% increase. It'd be extremely helpful if over the years we had been able to throw a little money in there. These are budgets. Sometimes we don't spend everything we anticipate spending. And so if we have any of that money, we're able to actually put away for kind of a rainy day, earmarked for something like health insurance. We'd be in a better situation than we are right now. And so the initial projections for total expenses, revenues, and calculations, you will see here that there are increases because the cost of doing business is what it is. We have a small decrease that we're looking at, and some of that has to do with cuts that we're looking to make that we're not going to be able to afford in certain areas. So we're going to have to forego some services. You're looking at a 15% increase in special programs and schools. And part of that is because of our special education projections, where we are looking that we will potentially have to have students placed. And so those costs are being what they are. We're looking at a 15.5% increase there. At the very bottom, you're going to see an extremely large increase of $951,000. And so that is an interfund transfer. That's related solely to the capital project. And when we talk about that, that's money essentially that we have to transfer within the budget to do some of the work. And people say, well, how the work hasn't even started. We've been very transparent all along that we have to be able to move this money to be able to use it in the 26-27 school year. And some of that is actually in the phase that happens before building even starts, right? So that's just some information there. Based on the current bus runs, contractual increases, and projected out-of-district runs, we're looking at a 14.6% increase also in pupil transportation. Reminding you that we're looking at a decrease in aid and an increase in the cost, right? So these are where the things don't really balance out. We're going to be spending more money, but receiving less aid on the money that we're spending as well. And so at this point in time, the general fund budget, we're looking at 11.09% increase in our expenses. And so you're probably saying, well, how are we gonna do that with a 2% tax cap, right? And so what that means is that we're going to have to figure out where that money is going to come from. And so that is, again, just highlighting the capital project expenses. And so one of the things that we look at expenses and then we look at revenues. So we know that we can only, without a supermajority vote, we can only increase our taxes up to that tax cap limit. And so the other major funding sources, state aid. And so we also know we're not getting that either, right? And so here we are in terms of revenues. So our real property taxes, the total tax levy is represented there. We have penalties on taxes that from year to year have increased by 20%. A textbook charge that has also increased, though a nominal amount of money, it has increased from last year significantly. And so when we look at charges for other services, they are down because we are not rendering those services and therefore we are not charging for them. One of the most significant decreases in revenue you will see is an 83% decrease in what is called other related services, other districts. So what happens is when a child is being educated here, but they are a foster child who entered foster care in another district, we bill that district back for all of the services that we provide for that student. And so that student is no longer enrolled within the school district, and because they are no longer enrolled within the school district, we are not billing back their district of origin. And so while we are not going to have that money coming in, we are also not going to be educating that child. So it's not as if, you know, we're just not getting that money and we're still educating that child. That's not the case. And then you'll look at other priority or BOCES expenses, and that's decreased 17%, projected to decrease 17%. And that has to do with BOCES services rendered and paid for and the aid that comes back on them. And then one of the things that I think is probably the most concerning here is the amount of money that we're looking at to have to appropriate from fund balance. As we've said, year over year, we want to keep that number as low as possible because after a while, it's just not going to be sustainable. And here we are, right? So we're looking at this point at a north of $3 million fund balance appropriation. And so that is not something that we're going to be able to sustain or even necessarily meet this year to be able to balance next year's budget. So we are not going to have the doom and gloom conversations just yet until we have closer to real numbers. But we need to be realistic as to where we are. And so some of this has to do with the capital project expenses and additional revenues to fund capital improvements as construction will begin in the 26-27 school year. And so we'll be looking at some of that. We're also going to look at some other lines that I think are really important, which will also be things on the next page. You can see charges for the services and use of our facilities. So even though it's not necessarily a whole lot of money this year, bringing in BOCES classrooms is an area of our budget that has grown significantly in terms of revenue. And as I have mentioned to you before, I've already told BOCES, we have more space. You need space. We have space. Come on over. And so we're going to continue to be strategic in all of the ways that we can in inviting our close neighboring districts to send students here that we can help in terms of that. And so this was a new coaster for the 25-26 school year in terms of the early college access coaster. And so we will be looking at the growth potential for next year as well. And so I think those are some of the highlights within there. And then as we said on the next slide here, the fund balance appropriations is when we use funds from this year to offset the tax impact for next year. This is something that is really for illustrative purposes as well, because we can't do this, right? We can't fund $3 million. And so we are going to need to find a way to cut that number by at least 40%. And so that is where we are right now, fully understanding that these are situations that are at this current moment. It's very stressful because our information is only as good as, you know, the last run that we've received or the last bit of information that we've gotten. And so, what you will see in the coming weeks are updates. Updated state aid runs may show additional revenues, which would also reduce the need for fund balance appropriation. Benefit rates through BOCES and purchases may be finalized, which may help with a little bit of relief. We're hoping that that DHIC number comes down. We're hoping that the number for NICER comes down. But again, even in the best case scenario for DHIC, we're still looking at a couple of $100,000. We are not looking at making up millions of dollars. And so we're going to have real conversations about programs, about staffing structures, and all that will be coming, you know, in the subsequent meetings here. And of course, we will have at some meeting coming up, we will have the tripartite budget for the Board of Education, which is the way that the school district budget is always structured in that three-part program, admin, and capital. And so we will give you all that information coming soon. Any questions?
Curious about
Be kind,
transportation.
Elliot is not here.
I'm just curious about like the transportation. Have we, and maybe it doesn't work, but there used to be like minimum, you know, if you're within a quarter mile of a bus stop, you gotta walk to it. Now, I'm probably making these numbers up, but there were those kind of numbers that then said, well, you know, if you squash that down, or if we just don't pick up kids that are within whatever of a mile of the school, have we gone through all those?
Yeah, and so some of what we're doing in terms of just preparation, right, is having conversations that will inform if we need to make hard decisions, what our options are, right? It's hard to make decisions if you don't know what the options even are. So we did ask first student to do different versions of bus runs, and, you know, what would the cost be if we took out one bus, you know, per run, and how would that impact student run times and all of those things. We've talked about going down to like the minimums in terms of, you know, the distance, like you're saying, not picking up students within this area. So we're looking to get all of that information so that we have it at the ready. I think at this point, we're just trying to give the most realistic, real worst case scenario of where we're at right now, and crossing our fingers that our the aid runs get better, not worse, crossing our fingers that those, you know, big ticket items like health insurance and whatnot come down. And so once we have more realistic numbers for you, we will provide them to you. But this is where we are at this present moment.
I mean, it's this discussion of this whole school district budgeting is really a political issue in Albany, where if you say, you gotta help us with the tax cap. I'm not talking about getting rid of it. I think it's a great control to have on there, but you have to look at the things that are exempted from the tax cap to say, there's no way this should be under a fixed percentage, because it just doesn't work. But the legislators take it as you're attacking, you know, the tax cap. We want to do universal daycare. Well, that's interesting, but where are we getting the money for it? Now, and if you're going to say, oh, I'll give you $50,000 for that. But then it turns around where, oh, by the way, you got 50,000 less over here, and now it's under the tax cap, so it's even worse.
Right.
It's probably the most frustrating thing to even listen to, because you can see the political messages that are being set up by these conversations. It's I don't know.
So I'm fortunate to have a seat at the table because of the organizations that I am on the steering committee and executive board for. So yesterday we had a meeting with Shelley Mayer, who is the Senate Education Chair. And so we had a great dialogue with her. I mean, she definitely understands the issues that districts are facing. I think she's always very gracious in giving us her time and giving us her honest opinions. I think, you know, things like even the pre-K conversation, right? It doesn't necessarily impact us the same way that it impacts other districts. Wanting to make that universal where, well, we do have a seat in Millbrook for every child that wants to come, right? Realistically speaking, there are other districts who now have to find space for hundreds of students that they're not currently educating. And who doesn't want to see our youngest kiddos, right, have an opportunity to go to school? But I think there's just not a lot of, like foresight and planning time that's given, you know, with a deadline of not this coming year, but the next year. And there's even some people, in the, you know, in the assembly and in the Senate who want that to happen for this coming school year, right? And it's like, of course, like, you know, high in the sky, we would all love to just be able to do all of the things for our kids. But there's some real issues in terms of making these things happen. On Friday, I am meeting with Michelle Hinchy's office and Dee Dee Barrett's office, just to speak to the specifics of what Millbrook is facing. I know we are doing our best to kind of get it out there, both on like the large scale, speaking to people like Shelley, and then also trying to speak to just our local, you know, elected officials so that they can hear specific messages from our district, which are hopefully echoed by other districts. And maybe if they hear it enough and enough people hear it, they bring it back and can actually do something. I think some things don't necessarily gain traction. It kind of depends on what party is bringing them forward as well at this point. And so we really try to kind of spread our advocacy. But we're doing all we can as superintendents to get the word out there.
No, I mean, it would be nice if they even understood what it's like to be in a Millbrook, Weavertuck, Pine Plains, Dover, even Pauling, where in Arlington, maybe you have 10 math teachers. And so you got to make some budget cuts. You go from 10 to 9. Great. It's tough. No one wants to do it. But then you go to a school like, you know, one of the smaller districts and you say, okay, you got one math teacher.
Right.
What are you gonna do? You know, you got 2 math teachers. What are you gonna do? You're gonna, you know, get rid of one and double up the size of the classes? I mean, it's not the same issue, but in a lot of cases, they treat it like, you know, an Arlington and a Millbrook should be treated the same way.
Right, and I think too, when you're talking about a place like Arlington or Lavender, their industrial tax base is so different that, you know, they can afford the
Yeah.
large, you know, budget that they have, right? We're talking about a really small budget and a really big deficit at this point, and so we don't have a lot of fat to trim.
And then you take the tiny bit that's, you know, controllable.
Right.
And
And that's a big piece of it.
that's, you know, that makes it even worse.
No, that's a big piece of it. So we are doing what we can. We're fighting on all fronts. I will be participating in lobby day on, next, I have no idea, Tuesday, I think it is. The 3rd, I believe. I have multiple meetings set up. I will be participating in all of them. You know, hopefully one of many voices will get the message across. I'm also participating next week in the statewide athletic council conversation about the non-public school issues. So I will be there engaged in that conversation. I do want to say that I had the most fabulous experience last week. I went to the best conference that I've ever been to as an educator. So in 22 years, for me to say it was the best, and mean it, like it was the best conference that I've ever been to. It was about, so it was about community policing and safeguarding schools. That was the name of the training. And it was so impactful. Like one of the days, the keynote speakers were Carly and Reagan Posey, So Reagan Posey was a first grader at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. He was the little boy who led 8 of his classmates out of the building and down the street to an adjacent neighbor's house. So this is one of his first speaking engagements, actually. Not his first, but one of his first. His mom has been speaking for a while. And to hear him speak was unbelievable, right? Because you hear about these stories and you hear about people who experienced them or were adjacent to them, but to actually hear it from this little boy who's now 20 years old, I did everything I could not to cry, but it was extremely difficult, I will tell you that. But so powerful, so unbelievable. And I think it just reaffirmed everything that I do in terms of school safety and the amount of energy that I put into it in the region. That's why, right? Like, so we never have to have a moment or a day like that. There was also a presentation from, his name is David Buds from the FBI, and he talks about the impact on first responders and law enforcement, and like post-traumatic stress and how there's so much support that is needed for them. And I was thinking, right, like as school administrators or even like school employees, we see a lot, we interact with so many people and it's like, it does not compare at all to law enforcement or first responders, but we see so much and I feel called to do something about that. Because as I was sitting there listening to that, I was sort of going through like experiences from my own career, or like friends that I've had that have experienced something within their school community and the impact that it's had on them, right? And how we're really quick to shoot that text and be like, let me know if you need anything, right? But how often we fail to actually reach out and like actually check on that person. And how, being in these leadership positions, we make sure everyone around us is okay, because that's our job, right? But like, do we ever really look at each other and really so I'm actually arranging a time with David Buds to go to the FBI headquarters in Lockport, New York, to receive train the trainer training, to be able to bring some of this back for other educators to benefit from. So what I said to him was, would you come down and speak to a group of, school administrators? And he said, to be honest with you, with my responsibilities and stuff, it would be very difficult for me to carve out that time since the mission of my organization is directed at first responders. He said, but if you put a team together, come up to Lockport and I'll train a team and you can take this mission back and help support others. So that is my new passion project, because I think it really matters. And I think educators need it maybe in a very different way, but possibly just as much as some of the first responders in the field. So on a positive note, I had an awesome experience and I was very reluctant to go, but I was really glad I did.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, I mean, it's really scary to you start putting your head down. Can I cut $5 there? Can I cut $6 there? And little by little, your attention gets drawn away from making sure everything else is working, and you're constantly just trying to beat out of the walls another dollar or two. I don't know. All right, anything else?
No.
No.
Hey, Caroline,
Comments? Anybody?
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. And I know Howard and I both, I can't believe it's a year already. I would just like to go on the record that I find it abhorrent that they cut this funding. I don't care what political party it is. I just want to go on the record saying that. And for the public, I think I ask you this every year, if anyone's either watching or will go back and watch it, especially the transportation, do they ever reach out and say, we have to cut the transportation because of XYZ? Or do you ever get any explanation as to, number one, why the budget's late, or number two, why some of the cuts actually happen?
No, because they don't answer to us, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's the unfortunate part is We have, if I didn't mention this at this meeting, I have mentioned it in the past. We've resubmitted our transportation contracts over and over and over again. Updating numbers, adding as much information as possible, both to our summer and school year runs, just to make sure that everything that we've provided is 100% accurate, and somehow, even though we spend more, we get less aid back on it. So we don't really even understand why some of these things are happening, and we're communicating directly with people at state aid and the office of the budget and everything else, and we get no better answers than we're able to provide all of you.
Well, I did like that forum. I jumped on that. I think it's great that, there's some local politicians and the superintendents that are getting together and trying to do something. I just wanted for the record to state that it's absolutely ridiculous this is the way kids get to school to be educated. And not that there's anything else in the budget that isn't just as important, but I think it's ridiculous. And I think New York State really needs to step it up and come up with some answers and stop cutting the funds, because it's terrible. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and so happy to do it, right? Like Perry said, you get focused on so many things, right? But we also have school districts to run. So the amount of time that, a small group of superintendents, which I'm extremely proud to be a part of, I have to say, like the work that we're doing is really valuable, but it's exhausting to have to go shake the trees for something that public education, it should be publicly funded, right? And so there should be funding for the things that the state is requiring us to do. I think that's the hardest part to swallow, is that they require year after year more and more of us as schools, right? Like, we no longer are just responsible for education, but we're responsible of so many other facets of students' lives, and we accept that responsibility very graciously and are willing to do it. But then there should also be support for that, both financially and also just like logistically. There's certain things that, just figure it out. And it's like, there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many school days in a year, right? And we have to do all of the things. So it does become a little crazy. It's a bit of a tug of war of where we place our time. And so unfortunately, at this point in time, there's nothing more important that I can be doing than having these conversations with these elected officials.
Public education is under attack in New York State.
Yeah,
And if you ask some of these people in their little glass houses up in Albany, of course they'll say, just do it. I mean, they used to just saying that. They won't give you an answer. Why? Why is public education under attack? But each year, like you said, they make it harder and harder. You gotta dot this I, you do everything they want, and they'll still cut it. They'll cut themselves a piece of pie and say, here's a piece of pie. Take it back from you, and then they'll give you some crumbs off the crust and say, you should be satisfied.
yeah.
And until the taxpayer in this state wakes up, and I don't care what party is in power or not, and says, we need new people here,
Yeah.
things are not gonna get any better.
Yeah. And so, my frustration is that there's children's experiences hanging in the balance, right? And they deserve better. So I'll keep fighting. I'm one of many voices. So
Thank you.
yeah, hopefully Lobby Day will have some impact.
Other questions, comments?
Thank you.
All right. Anna?
We're on to Anna.
Everyone, I know hard act to follow. Thank you for having me to share a little bit about EPS and how the department's doing. We have implemented monthly meetings in which I meet with all departments that fall under people personnel. So monthly I meet with speech psychologists, nurses, and special education teachers in each building. It has been a great opportunity as a new administrator to really listen to what is working well and hear what needs to be improved. So I appreciate those meetings very much. And I want to thank all of the educators that come, show up, with their time, their candor and their student-centered views. It's been really eye-opening and I hope we can continue to have those meetings so we can improve programs in the district together. These meetings have also been a great opportunity to think and be creative about how we can support students with what we have. As Ms. Hernandez is saying, we have to kind of get creative with meeting student needs with what we have in district, and we are definitely doing that, and a lot of that work comes straight from the educators that are working with them. So we are really thinking about how many resources we have and how many student needs we can build, so we can keep them within our building if possible. I have had a chance to visit our out-of-district programs, and some of these, we have some students that are attending out-of-districts, out-of-district programs. And I am working to either build capacity here in learning about how these programs are run, so we could bring them back. Or really working with the other districts to see if we can run some of the programs and they could send us their students, and they can run some of the programs and we could send them some of us, so we could do some of that intermunicipal work that Ms. Hernandez was also speaking to. I have had the pleasure to be part of both county and state meetings monthly, so that I can stay up to date with the most important information about what's going on with the special education world in the state and in the county. One of the things that I have learned is that these meetings are, even though these meetings are filled with experts and a lot of people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, the questions never cease. And it's great to see that we continue to have questions and to really try to learn more about how we can better serve our students. And I am beyond happy to be part of this group of collaborative directors. We are also really excited that as of today, we have a new school psychologist, which will be joining us in April. So I want to welcome Beth Rizzi. She comes with a ton of experience, and we are really looking forward to her contributions to the team and the district. More exciting news on the nursing front. We have a fully staffed nursing team. So we are also welcoming Ms. Keegan as of last board meeting, I believe. She's our newest placer, and she has been a perfect addition to the team, and hoping that she feels just as home as she has made our students feel already. So we're really glad to have her. I could go on and on because there's so many exciting things happen, but I will take questions about any of the items on the board report if you have any. If not, I'll close out with all of those welcomings of new staff that we are beyond excited to have on our team. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you talk a little bit more about where you think our E&L department is? And like, do we have, what's the plan for, E&L 2.0 or are we in good shape as far as staffing, but also program?
Yes, so we are in good shape with staffing. We have an E&L coordinator. Her name is Allie Ellis, and she has essentially filled the role that I was in. She has been running all the departmental needs on that end. We have enough staffing for the students we have right now and have capacity to have more students come in. We essentially have students in every grade, which gives us the capacity to then bring in more students in every grade without having to up staff. When it becomes a problem with staffing is when there isn't a student in every grade, and then we need to create another class, and then that gets added to scheduling. So if we have the schedule built in with almost every grade, I think the only grade we're missing right now is second grade. So the next So the second grade didn't coming to Alden next year. So at Alden won't have a third grade ENL class, so unless anything like that shifts, we should be good to go. We are at max, just because of the grade span. How ENL works is that it doesn't matter if it's 1 student or 20 students, you have to provide the minutes. And when it's such a span of grades, you have to provide the minutes, whether it's 1 student per grade or, like I said, 20. So right now, we're in good shape. Because we do have the capacity to add students without adding staff.
Unless we were to get somebody who came in that required pull-out services at one of the grade levels that's not represented in pull-out services.
Yes, yes.
So if we had like a newcomer who required push-in services as well as pull-out services, like on a reference, it all comes down to units of study. So the number of minutes of services that a child is required to have over a 5-day period. And so all of our grades have push-in or pull-out services, but if one of the grades doesn't have pull-out services and the student needs push-in and pull-out services, that's where things get very tricky.
Yeah. For now, we have been able to get creative with that. We have been able to combine more than 1 grade for the pullout session because we can do that with the recommendations from the state. So, for example, if a student, we have a pullout in 1st grade and a student comes in kindergarten and needs a pullout, then we can pull those students together. So we have been able to manage well in doing that. The biggest concern is additional students at the high school. Those students, especially if they're true newcomers, receive 3 periods of ENL a day. So then obviously that becomes on a 5-period contractual schedule becomes a heavy lift as far as staffing is concerned. But so far so good. And we will continue to be creative with how we manage the time with combining periods and providing the services that the students need.
And we've said years ago, and I mean, this is, I don't think how many years ago it was, but there had been an effort to start a program for the parents of the ENL students. Do we still do that? Do we not? Can we not afford it? I mean.
A program in which way?
Like, you know, a lot of the ENL students, their parents also could use help with, you know, English as a.
Yes, so we don't currently do that. We have talked about it, but even when we try to bring in families for our ENL nights or for our meetings that we are required to have per state, it is very difficult to be able to meet the time that they're available versus the time that we have availability here to provide those services. So that usually is where the breakdown is. Aside from working, there's also like the majority are parents because their children come here and there's after school stuff. So that has been the difficult thing to kind of make happen. We can definitely revisit those conversations. That's something that I would love to do. Like when I came from Spain, that was essentially the biggest hardship for my parents was not being able to connect with the school community. So I think it would be, I think we can definitely consider like discussing whether that's something that we can make happen again.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even if we offered it right now, there might be a reluctance on the part of some to even.
Yeah.
For all the obvious, you know, climate reasons that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
But that is one of the things that we hope that eventually our continuing education program will be able to offer is English as a new language for some of the community members.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
All right, next is warrants, financials and warrants. Do I have a motion?
Oh, so moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, next under new business is accepting a donation from Christina Meyer of hats and gloves. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Comments?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. That's, I mean, especially this winter. My
Mhm.
goodness. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any against? All right, oops. Next is, accepting a donation of $706.20, from the MEF, for STEAM t-shirts. Do I have a motion?
So,
Do I have a second?
second.
Comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, MEF. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right. Next is the public comment and questions. Anything? No? All right. Next is enrollment. I think that this doesn't need a motion, right? It's just.
Just a report.
Any questions or comments about that? All right. Incident report. Questions? No? No. All right. Let's see. The future agenda items, you guys know the drill. So next is, a proposal to go to executive session. Just to remind everybody that may or may not be listening. The executive session, we go to talk about specific legal and personnel issues, but any actions that come out of that have to be done in public session. So that just because we go to executive session doesn't mean the meeting's over, just means that, we're gonna go offline for a bit and then come back, and take any action. So with that, do I have a motion to go to executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? How about, 5 minutes? We good?